They were climbing a mountain. But when they reached the top, they noticed something was wrong. Michael Patterson felt the weight of the urn on his back as his lungs burned with the thin air. Each step up the mountain was a struggle against the pain tightening his chest. But it wasn't just the physical effort tormenting him. 2 weeks ago, his father Robert had passed away, leaving one final request that haunted Michael. He wanted his ashes scattered at the peak of the Appalachian Mountains, where he used to take his sons fishing when they were little. "Mike, are you sure this is the right spot?" asked Kevin, his younger brother, wiping sweat from his face despite the biting cold. "Dad always talked about that place where you could see 3 towns at once. It has to be here," Michael replied, adjusting the backpack protecting the urn. Behind them, Arnold, the old guide who knew those trails like the back of his hand, walked in silence. There was something odd about his behavior since they'd started the climb. He was quieter than usual, avoiding Michael's gaze whenever they asked about the route. The unexpected snowstorm began punishing the group when they were still hours from the summit. Jennifer, Michael's wife, pulled her coat tighter and glanced worriedly at the darkening sky. "Maybe we should turn back," she said, her voice shaky from the cold. "No," Michael answered firmly. "We promised, Dad. We're seeing this through." Kevin exchanged a nervous look with Arnold. There was something Michael didn't know, something weighing on both men like a stone in their stomachs. The group pressed on through the worsening storm. Michael led the way, determined, carrying not just the urn but also the weight of always being the responsible son, the one who took care of everything since their mother passed 10 years ago. When they finally glimpsed the summit through the thick fog, Michael felt a moment of relief. Soon he'd fulfill his father's last wish, and maybe finally find peace. But as they reached the peak, something made Michael's blood run cold. A tent stood there. Not an old, abandoned one, but a recent setup, with fresh supplies scattered around and clear signs someone had been there recently. "What is this?" Jennifer whispered, pointing at the tent. Michael stepped forward on trembling legs. On a smooth rock, carefully folded, was a note. His hands shook as he recognized the unmistakable handwriting. "I knew you'd come looking for me here. Don't be mad at me. Robert." Michael's world collapsed. The urn slipped from his hands, tumbling onto the rocks and cracking open, revealing nothing but sand and small stones from their backyard. "Kevin," Michael's voice came out as a strangled whisper. "What does this mean?" His younger brother couldn't meet his eyes. Arnold hung his head, clearly part of something Michael still didn't understand. "Talk to me, Kevin," Michael shouted, his voice echoing through the mountains. "Mike, Dad made me promise not to tell. He said it was better this way." "Better this way? Dad's alive?" The question hung in the air as the snowstorm swirled around them. Jennifer looked between the brothers, trying to make sense of it all. Arnold fidgeted with the gear, staying out of the conversation. "He didn't want you to know," Kevin finally confessed. "But I swear, Mike, I don't know where he is now. I only helped him at first. At first with... what? With Fakin. His death." Michael's legs nearly gave out. Everything he'd lived through these past 2 weeks, the grief, the tears at the funeral, all of it had been a lie. "Why?" was all he could manage. Arnold finally stepped forward. There was something in his eyes that showed he knew about the situation. "Your father was deeply ashamed, Michael. Company matters, problems he couldn't solve alone." "What problems?" "Only he can explain that," said the guide. "But I think we'd better get down from here. This storm's going to get worse." Michael looked around, trying to process the information. Inside the tent, he found more evidence of his father's recent presence. A thermos still warm, cookies he recognized as Robert's favorite brand, and more notes. In one, his father wrote about not being able to face his children after what he'd done. In another, he asked for forgiveness and said it was better they thought he'd passed away peacefully than discover the truth about his failures. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us newcomers. Now, back to the story. The storm forced the group to take shelter in the tent for a few hours. During that time, Michael pressed Kevin until the whole truth came out. The family's construction business, which Robert had built over 30 years, was bankrupt. Massive debts had piled up after a few contracts went wrong. His father had lost nearly everything, including the house where Michael and Kevin had grown up. "He sold the house?" Michael asked, disbelieving. "He had to sell it to pay off some of the debts. He didn't want you to know. Said he'd rather you thought he'd passed away as a dignified man than as a failure? But how did you fake the funeral? The death certificate?" Kevin explained that Arnold had helped. The guide had a cousin who worked at the records office and another who knew someone at the hospital. With a few favors and money left from the house sale, they managed to forge the necessary documents. "And the body in the casket?" "Sandbags," Arnold admitted, ashamed. "Your father said it was the only way to start a new life without dragging you all down with him." Michael felt a mix of anger and despair. On one hand, he was relieved to know his father was alive. On the other, he couldn't understand why Robert had chosen to leave their lives rather than trust them to solve the problems together. Jennifer, who had listened silently, finally spoke. "Mike, I think I understand your father. After losing your mother, he was always afraid of disappointing you too. But we're family. Families face problems together." "Not everyone thinks that way," Arnold said. "Your father carries a heavy guilt. He always saw himself as the provider, the protector. When that fell apart, he didn't know how to go on. When the storm eased enough to allow them to descend, Michael was determined to find his father. But first, they needed to return home and understand the full extent of the company's debts. As they hiked down the mountain, Kevin revealed more details. Robert had left instructions about where to find important documents and had mentioned a few places he might be hiding. He talked about Aunt Dorothy's place in Blue Ridge. Said if he ever needed to disappear, it'd be a good spot. Aunt Dorothy died 5 years ago, Kevin. But the house is still there. No one's sold it yet because of the fights between the cousins. Michael absorbed each detail like pieces of a puzzle. His mind was already planning the next steps. First, they'd check the company's financial situation. Then, they'd start searching for Robert in the places Kevin mentioned. Jennifer walked beside her husband, watching the determination grow in his eyes. She'd known Michael for 15 years and knew that once he set his mind to something, nothing in the world could make him give up. "Are you sure you want to find him?" she asked. "Maybe he's right. Maybe it's better to leave things as they are." "No," Michael replied firmly. "He's my father. I won't let him carry this guilt alone." When they reached the base of the mountain, where they had left the car, Michael already had a plan. They would first go to the company office to assess the damage. Then they would begin a systematic search for Robert. The trip back to Asheville was tense. Kevin drove while Michael fiddled with his phone, trying to reach the company accountant. Arnold had offered to help with the search, driven by guilt for his part in the deception. "Mike," Kevin said hesitantly, "there's one more thing I didn't tell you." "What?" "Dad hasn't been doing well health-wise. Before leaving, he was having memory lapses, mixing things up. I think it might be something serious." This made Michael's heart race. If his father was sick and alone, the situation was even more urgent. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" "Because he made me promise not to. Said he didn't want to be a burden to anyone." "A burden? He's our father." The conversation was interrupted when Michael's phone rang. It was Mrs. Williams, a neighbor from their old family home. "Michael, sweetheart, I'm so glad you answered. There's a man here asking about you. Says he's from the bank and needs to talk urgently about some of your father's debts." Michael's stomach turned. If creditors were looking for the family, it meant the financial situation was even worse than they'd thought. "Mrs. Williams, can you tell him I'll be there first thing tomorrow? And please don't give any information about where we are." "Of course, dear. But he said the deadline is up. Something about asset seizure." Michael hung up, feeling the weight of reality. Not only had his father disappeared, but he'd left behind a financial bomb that could explode in the family's face at any moment. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us newcomers. Now back to the story. The next morning, Michael was at the construction company's office at the crack of dawn. What he found was even worse than he'd expected. Stacks of overdue bills, court summons, and debt collection notices covered his father's desk. Deborah, the company secretary of over 15 years, arrived shortly after and found Michael with his head in his hands. "I can't believe you came in today, Michael. You lost your father 2 weeks ago and here you are." Michael looked at her, unsure whether to tell the truth. He decided he needed help, and Deborah had always been trustworthy. "Deborah, I need to tell you something, but you have to promise it stays between us." When he finished explaining the situation, Deborah stayed silent for several minutes. Then, she got up and went to the filing cabinet, pulling out a thick folder. "I knew something was wrong," she said. "Your father had been acting so strange these past months, always nervous, getting calls that upset him. Do you know anything about the debts?" "More than I'd like. Your father asked me to organize all the paperwork, but he never said why. Now I understand." Deborah showed Michael the true scale of the problem. The company owed over $2 million to suppliers, banks, and employees. 3 construction projects had been halted due to unpaid bills, sparking lawsuits that could lead to jail time for abandonment of work. "Why didn't Dad tell us?" Michael murmured. "Because he's too proud, and because he feels guilty. The debt started when he tried to expand the company too fast, taking on jobs way beyond our capacity. And now? What can we do?" "First, we need to talk to the creditors and try to negotiate. Second, we need to find your father. Some of these debts are in his name personally. If we don't resolve this soon, he could be arrested." The word arrested echoed in Michael's mind like a funeral bell. Now he understood why his father had chosen to disappear. Pride and fear had driven him to make a desperate decision. Jennifer arrived at the office mid-morning, bringing coffee and sandwiches. She found Michael and Deborah surrounded by papers, trying to get a full picture of the situation. "How's it going?" she asked, kissing her husband's forehead. "Bad, really bad, but at least now we know what we're up against." Kevin showed up shortly after, accompanied by Arnold. The guide had offered to help search for Robert, knowing many people in the Appalachian Mountains who might have seen the runaway. "Any news?" Kevin asked. "Too much, all of it bad," Michael replied, gesturing to the stacks of documents. "Kevin, do you have any idea where Dad got so much money borrowed?" "No. I only handled the operational side of the projects. I was never involved in the finances." Deborah interrupted the conversation. "Michael, there's one more thing. Your father left a letter for you. He told me to give it to you only if you found out the truth." With trembling hands, Michael opened the envelope. The letter was long and emotional. Robert explained every decision he had made, asking for forgiveness for his mistakes, and especially for the lie about his departure. In the letter, his father revealed that he had started showing signs of forgetfulness. At times, he mixed up dates and names. The fear of developing the same illness that had taken his mother terrified him. "I don't want you to remember me as a failure or as a sick man who lost his dignity. I'd rather you keep the image of the father who fought to give his family the best, even if in the end he fell short." Michael had to stop reading several times to hold back tears. The pain he felt was no longer just for his missing father, but for the anguish Robert must have been feeling, alone and carrying so much weight. "Does he mention where he is?" Jennifer asked. "Not exactly, but he says he found a place where he can work honestly and try to save money to start paying off the debts." "What kind of work?" "He doesn't say, only that it's something simple that doesn't require much skill." Arnold, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. "I've known your father a long time. He's always been good with his hands, could fix just about anything. He might be working as a handyman or caretaker somewhere." The thought of Robert, once a respected businessman in town, now doing manual labor because of debts Michael could have helped resolve, infuriated the eldest son. "We're going to find him," Michael said firmly. "Deborah, can you try to negotiate more time with the creditors? Explain the situation, tell them we're working to resolve it." "I can try, but some have already filed lawsuits. It's going to be tough." "Do what you can. Kevin, you and Arnold are coming with me to look for Dad. Jennifer, can you stay here and help Deborah with the contacts?" The plan was set. For the first time in 2 weeks, Michael felt he had a clear direction. He would find his father, and together they would fix this. the way family should. Their first stop was Aunt Dorothy's house in Blue Ridge. The place was visibly abandoned, with weeds growing in the yard and dusty windows. But as they approached, they noticed signs of recent activity. The back door was unlocked. Inside, they found evidence that someone had been there: clothes drying on the back line, leftovers in the fridge, and a made-up bed in the smallest room. "He was here," Kevin said, recognizing one of his father's shirts on the line. "But when?" Michael examined the leftover food. "This is recent. Maybe 2 or 3 days old." In the room where Robert had slept, they found more notes. In one, the father wrote about getting work on a nearby farm, tending cattle. In another, he mentioned the pain of being away from his children, but the certainty that it was for the best. The most disturbing was a note where Robert described moments of mental confusion, forgetting where he was or what day it was. He was clearly frightened by his own memory lapses. "Mike, we need to find him soon," said Kevin, his voice heavy with worry. "Let's ask around at the farms in the area. If he's working with cattle, someone must know him." The search through the farms lasted 2 days. Arnold knew many landowners in the region, which made conversations easier. On the 3rd day, they got their first solid lead. Old Man Jenkins, who owned a small property, confirmed hiring a man matching Robert's description. He showed up about 2 weeks ago, asking for work. Said his name was Robert Johnson. Hard worker, that man. Got up before sunrise to tend the cattle. "Where is he now?" "He left yesterday morning. Said he had to go, that people were coming to look for him. Left his pay behind, just asked me to give it to someone in need." Michael's heart sank. His father had run away again, knowing they were close. "Did he say where he was going?" "No, but he headed toward town. Might have been trying to catch a bus." Michael, Kevin, and Arnold rushed to the bus station in Blue Ridge. They arrived just in time to see a bus pulling out, bound for New York City. At the ticket counter, the clerk confirmed selling a ticket to a man matching Robert's description. "New York is huge," said Kevin, discouraged. "How are we going to find him there?" "We'll find him," Michael replied firmly. "He's our father, we won't give up." The trip to New York was tense. Michael called Jennifer to update her. She had good news. She'd negotiated longer deadlines with some creditors, and a lawyer friend had offered to help with the legal proceedings. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us newcomers out. Now, back to the story. In New York, the search seemed impossible. The city was enormous and Robert could be anywhere. But Michael remembered something his father always said: "When you're lost, look for places that remind you of home." "Let's go to Chinatown," Michael told his brothers. Dad always liked going there when he visited New York. Said the restaurants reminded him of Grandma's cooking. In Chinatown, they began showing Robert's photo to shopkeepers and boarding house owners. Arnold was the lucky one. A man selling vegetables recognized Robert. "This man bought vegetables here yesterday, said he was looking for work as a janitor or handyman. I pointed him to Mr. Thompson, who owns a building nearby." Mr. Thompson confirmed hiring Robert as a temporary janitor, but the man had worked only 1 day before disappearing again. "He seemed haunted," said Mr. Thompson, "kept looking around like someone might show up any minute. In the morning, he left a letter and took off." The letter was another apology from Robert, along with the mention that he was going somewhere he could find peace. He named a small town where he'd worked as a young man. "He's talking about Hot Springs," said Kevin. "I remember him saying he worked for a company there in his 20s. The trip to Hot Springs took 4 hours. Along the way, Michael talked to Jennifer on the phone. She had discovered something important in the company documents. "Mike, I found contracts showing that not all the debts are real. Some suppliers are charging way more than what was actually provided." "What do you mean?" "It seems your father was tricked by some people who took advantage of the situation. There are fake invoices, overpriced contracts. If we can prove this, the real debt is much smaller." This news brought hope to Michael. If the financial situation wasn't as dire as it seemed, maybe they could convince Robert to come back home. In Hot Springs, the search was easier. The town was smaller and people knew each other. A taxi driver recognized Robert from the photo and said he had taken the man to a remote neighborhood with cheap boarding houses. At the third place they visited, they succeeded. The owner, Mrs. Johnson, confirmed that Robert was staying there, but had left early to look for work. "He's a very polite man," she said, "but he seems to carry a deep sadness. He sits for hours in the backyard, staring at nothing." "Do you know where he went to look for work?" "He said he was going to the municipal school. They need a janitor there." Michael felt his heart race. They were finally close to finding his father. The municipal school was just a 10-minute walk from the boarding house. When they arrived, they found Robert talking to the principal in the courtyard. He was visibly thinner and looked exhausted, but he was alive and seemingly okay. When he saw his sons, Robert tried to run away again, but Michael sprinted after him and caught him, hugging him tightly. "Dad, stop, don't run anymore." "Michael, you don't understand. I ruined everything. I lost everything I built for you." "No, you didn't, Dad. You lost money, you lost property, but you didn't lose your family." Kevin joined the embrace, and the three men wept in the school courtyard, watched by the principal, who didn't understand the situation, but sensed the emotion of the moment. "Dad, we know everything," Kevin said, "about the debts, the company, your illness, and we want to help." "You can't help. I dug myself into a hole too deep." "Yes, we can," Michael replied. "Jennifer found out half the debts are fake. Some people took advantage of you. We'll prove it and reduce what we owe." "And even if we couldn't," Kevin continued, "you're more important than any money. We'd rather be poor and have our father alive than rich and orphaned." Robert looked into his son's eyes and saw the unconditional love he had tried to protect with his lie. He realized his decision to fake his departure had caused more pain than the debts ever could. "I was afraid," he admitted, "afraid of disappointing you, afraid of being a burden, afraid of ending up like your mother." "Dad, you'd never be a burden to us," Michael said. "And even if you got sick, we'd take care of you with love." "That's what family is," Kevin added, "sticking together in hard times." The school principal, who had watched the emotional reunion, discreetly approached. "Excuse the interruption, but would you like to use my office to talk more privately?" The three men spent the afternoon talking in the principal's office. Robert shared every detail about the debts, his failed attempts to fix things alone, and the despair that led him to disappear. Michael and Kevin explained how they had uncovered the truth and all the effort they'd made to find him. They also showed the evidence Jennifer had found about the fake debts. "Dad, we'll face this together," Michael said. "We'll take legal action against those who tried to cheat us, negotiate the real debts, and rebuild the company." "Are you sure?" "It'll be a lot of work, a lot of sacrifice." "We are," both sons replied in unison. Robert felt an immense relief lift from his heart. For the first time in months, he wasn't carrying the burden alone. His children were by his side, ready to face any hardship. The trip back to Asheville was completely different from the climb up the mountain. Instead of carrying an urn with fake ashes, Michael was bringing his father back alive, along with the hope of rebuilding their family. Jennifer was waiting for them at home with more good news. The lawyer had reviewed the contracts and confirmed that several charges were unjustified. With that, the real debt was around $200,000, still high but manageable. "And there's more," she said, hugging Robert. "3 old clients called saying they want to hire the company for small projects. If we accept, we can start generating income to pay off the debts." In the months that followed, the family worked together to rebuild the business. Michael took over the administrative side, Kevin handled the construction projects, and Robert, despite his age and the early signs of illness, contributed his experience and knowledge. It wasn't easy. There were long work days, sleepless nights spent planning payments, and moments of discouragement when problems seemed bigger than solutions. But they faced it all together. Deborah was key in the process, organizing finances and negotiating with creditors. Arnold also helped by recommending the company to acquaintances who needed construction services. A year after the deceptive climb up the mountain, the family gathered again at the same peak in the Appalachian Mountains. But this time, it was for a celebration. They had paid off 70% of the real debt, and the company was doing well, with contracts secured for the coming months. More importantly, Robert was under the care of specialist doctors, and with proper treatment, his memory lapses had significantly decreased. "Dad, do you regret trying to disappear?" Kevin asked as they gazed at the view of the 3 towns below. "I regret not trusting you all from the start," Robert replied. "I wasted precious time trying to carry everything alone. But in the end, it all worked out," Michael said. "Maybe we needed to go through this to become closer." Jennifer, who was 2 months pregnant, smiled as she watched the family reunited. "Our son will grow up knowing his grandfather and understanding that family never abandons family no matter what." Arnold, who had practically become part of the family, watched the scene with satisfaction. He deeply regretted helping Robert with the deception, but was happy to see everything had ended well. "Mrs. Williams was right," he said. "Family is like the roots of a tree. The stronger the storm, the deeper they hold." Robert looked at his sons and daughter-in-law, his heart overflowing with gratitude. He had nearly lost everything to pride and fear, but had learned that family love was stronger than any financial trouble. "You taught me it's better to be poor with dignity than rich with shame," he said, "and that there's no problem a united family can't solve." Michael hugged his father and said, "Dad, next time you have a problem, talk to us first, okay? Promise?" "I promise. And you promise you'll help me when I start forgetting things?" "Always," both sons replied. The family descended the mountain together, knowing they had overcome one of the biggest crises of their lives. The business would keep growing, the debts would be paid, and most importantly, they would never hide problems from each other again. Months later, when the baby was born, Robert held his grandson in his arms and told stories about the mountain where he had almost been lost forever, but where he had found the strength of family. The urn Michael had carried up the mountain now sat on the living room shelf, not filled with ashes, but with photos of their reunited family. It was a reminder that some treasures are only discovered when we think they're lost forever. The end. Now tell me what you thought of this story and where you're watching from. If you have something to share with us, leave a sincere comment below. Do you believe Robert made the right choice by trying to protect his family? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to like this video and most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you won't miss other heartwarming stories.